Alright guys, this is our Tuesday lesson, which I will teach on Wednesday. It's the last thing that will be on your test on Friday. I will probably give you a review on Thursday, so please pay attention. Now, a lot of the stuff that you're going to work here has to do with square roots, so you can use a calculator off your phone. If you tilt it landscape-wise, it should pop up with a little square root symbol. Or if you have access to one of those TI calculators, go ahead and use that. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're discussing today's lesson has to do a lot with the coordinate system. We're going to deal with segments and rays. Mostly, actually, scratch that. We're not going to deal with segments. We're basically only going to deal with coordinates. Finding the distance between 2 points, or finding the midpoint of 2 points on a segment. So let's start off with distance formula. I am going to expect you to know this formula backwards and forwards because we will be using it a lot. So before we get to the distance formula, I do need you to remember what a coordinate is. And a coordinate is anywhere on the coordinate system, and it involves the variable x and y. The coordinate is set up just as such. So if we are going to use the distance formula, you're going to have two sets. So usually you distinguish it by a subscript letter. So you'll have like x sub 1, y sub 1, and then if I give you a second point, then it's going to be x sub 2, y sub 2. Here we have example number 1. Find the distance between 2 points on the graph. I am going to expect you to understand how to read a graph. You did this in algebra. You have your 4 quadrants. You have your quadrant 1, you have your quadrant 2, you have your third quadrant, and then you have your fourth quadrant. Okay? This one, quadrant 1 has all positives. Quadrant 2, it's a negative, positive. Quadrant 3, all negatives. And quadrant 4 is positive, negative. So if you printed out the sheet, your x is always first, which means you're going to have to find the coordinate for that one and the coordinate for that one. Now, it doesn't matter who is first as long as you find the coordinates. Yes, these are given to you, so if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's negative 5, and then the y, 1, 2, 3, so comma 3. If I'm looking for this one down here, so it's 1, 2, negative 2, and then it went down 1, 2, 3, negative 3. That's how they got those two coordinates. Okay, so if we're going to find the distance for these, all they did was simply substitute into the formula. Notice in this what they did was once they substituted, and yeah, sure enough, if you have one of those scientific calculators, those nice smart calculators, you can simply do this part, all of it in the calculator, and it will go directly to your answer. Okay. But I would like for you to practice to go from each step to the following step. So if you do this, then that means that you have square root, and if we're going to work this out, negative 3 minus 3, that would be a total of negative 6 squared. plus the differences in the y's. Oh, actually, it did the differences in the y's first. Nice. Then you get negative 2 plus negative, that's 4, 2, 3. So you're going to get negative 3, or actually positive 3 squared. So this becomes square root of, and guess what? Look, 36 plus 9, which ends up being square root of 45. And if you put that in your calculator, you should get around 6.7. So let's go into example. Let's go to number 3. They give you your 2 points. Give you negative 7, comma negative 2, 11, comma 3. So here you'd go x1, y1, x2, y2. And let's move over here where we have extra space for it to work on. The distance formula is the differences in the x's plus the differences of the y's squared. All you're doing is plugging in. You've already labeled who your x1, your y1 is, your x2, who your y2 is. You just have to plug in. So we have a square root. x2 is 11 minus your x1 is negative 7 squared plus, and then your y2 is 3 minus your y1 is negative 2 squared. So here we have bam, bam, square root. Yes, I could plug this all in a calculator, but I'm not going to do that. So this becomes 18 squared plus plus 5 squared. $324 plus 25, and I'm running out of whiteboard here. So this becomes the square root of 349. Let's see if I have square root of 349, and it's going to give me a decimal. 18 point, let's round to the nearest tenth. Again, if I ever make a mistake, make sure you let me know. Alright, let's jump into the distance formula. Really, it's not difficult once you memorize it or you write it down somewhere. It is just plug in. Once you isolate who the two coordinates are that you're trying to measure the distance, you just plug those in, and away you go. You can do it manually, just step by step, or you can enter it into your calculator. Let's work on the midpoint formula. This one, I find it a little bit easy, but everybody usually gets confused because there's a lot of stuff going on there. But if you want to really just remember it, the midpoint formula. So if I give you two coordinates and I'm asking you to find the coordinate in the middle, you're only going to add the x's, divide by 2, which means that gives you your x coordinate. Then you add the y's, divide by 2, and that will give you the y coordinate. So I think finding the midpoint should be easy if I give you the 2 points that I want you to find the midpoint for. For example, in example number 4, I'm giving you 7, -5 and 9, -1. So if I want to find the midpoint, I'm going to add the x's, divide by 2, that'll give me the midpoint x, and then I'm going to add the y's, divide by 2, and that's going to give me the y midpoint coordinate. Alright, so the x's, we have 7 and we have 9, so 7 plus 9 divided by 2, and then for the y's we have -5 and -1. We're going to add those two and divide by 2. So 7 plus 9 ends up being 16 divided by 2, that's 8. -5 plus -1 ends up being -6 divided by 2, that's -3. So our coordinate is 8, -3. That is our midpoint. Let's do one more. Let's do number 5. Again, they give us the x, the y, the x, the y. They give you two coordinates. So fairly easy enough. If I want to find the midpoint, I'm going to add x's, divide by 2. I'm going to add the y's, divide by 2. So for number 5, -7 plus -3 divided by 2, and then the y is 4 plus -4 divided by 2. So -7 and 3 gives you -4 divided by 2. So the midpoint x is going to be -2. If I add these two together, these contradict each other, so I will get 0 over 2, which is just 0. So my midpoint is -2, 0. If there are any questions, again, ask me. So now let's get into the more complicated math that involves the midpoint formula. The only thing that makes this difficult is that now you're only given one endpoint and you're given the midpoint, and you're supposed to find the other. So it's like if you have your first coordinate A, you have your midpoint coordinate B, and you don't know C. So in this problem, they give you -1, actually, hold on, that's the midpoint. Find the coordinate of A. Oh, in this case. Okay, so let's switch the question mark. They're giving you C, and this is the one they're missing. They give you the midpoint, -1, 2. They give you C, this endpoint over here, 3, -5. So we already know that we have a midpoint x, which is equal to adding the two x's and dividing by 2. We have the midpoint y, which is adding the two y's and divide by 2. The only thing that we're going to do now is to simply plug in the information that's given to us. This is where the algebra practice I was giving you last week comes in. So let's look at the information they are giving us. Do we have the value of the midpoint x? Yes, we do. It's -1. So I'm going to put in -1. Do they give me one of these two? Do they give me one of the x's? Of course they do. So now this becomes algebra. We have 3 plus x on top, where both of those are being divided by 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this 2 by multiplying times 2 to get rid of those 2. If I do that to one side, I got to do it to the other. This becomes -2, and then all we have on this side is 3 plus x. And it's a simple move, and we have -5 equals x. So now we have the x coordinate of A. We do the same thing for the y. Midpoint y is equal to y plus y divided by 2. Do they give us this? Yes, they do. They give us a 2. So we're going to replace it with 2. Do they give us one of these? Of course they do. They've given us -5. And you're going to find out that finding that endpoint is the same process for the x as it is for the y. So I'm going to multiply both sides times 2. This becomes 4. These disappear, and I'm left with -5 plus y. Then it's a move. 9 equals y. And now we have the y value of the coordinate. So let's do number 7 on our own here. They're giving us 2 coordinates. Let's draw this out. I prefer the drawing, so I'm going to draw a segment with 2 endpoints with a midpoint, and let's label. So they're finding the coordinates of J if K is the midpoint. So K is the midpoint. K has a coordinate of -5, 10. And L has a coordinate, so it's J. L has a coordinate of -8, 6. Okay. Okay, so this is my midpoint. This is midpoint x, comma, y. So we're going to substitute into this formula. Midpoint x is equal to adding the x's, divide by 2. Do they give us a midpoint x? Yes, they give us -5. So let's substitute -5. Do they give us one of these? Yes, they do. They give us -8. So I'm going to go ahead and let's erase that. Let's put -8. And now let's work the problem out. Multiply both sides times 2. You're going to find that that's always going to be your first step. This will be -10 is equal to -8 plus x. Move my 8 across, and you'll have -2 is equal to x. So the coordinate for j is equal to -2, comma. Now we got to solve for the y part. Midpoint y is equal to both y's added together divided by 2. Do they give me the midpoint y? Yes, they do. They give me 10, so let's substitute. And they give us one of the y's. They give us 6. So I'm going to go ahead and substitute that one there too. Let's work it out. Times 2 times 2. This becomes 20. This becomes 6 plus y. These are gone. -6, -6, and I get 14 is equal to y, so the y coordinate is now 14. And that is your answer. Alright, last part of the lesson here is practice with algebra. Let's do, I'm not going to go over 9, let's just do either 10 or 11. Let's go with 11 just because it involves the diagram over here on the left. So, actually I lied, let's do 10 because the 10 requires us to draw. If G is the midpoint of FH, so that means if I were to draw something, I'm going to draw FH, and then they're saying G is the midpoint. They're saying that F to G is 14x plus 25. And then G to H is 73 minus 2x. They want us to find this distance here. So we have to solve for x first. That's not where we stop, because once we solve for x, then we're going to substitute into only one of them, because it's a midpoint, so they're both equal to each other. We just substitute into one and double it. Don't make your life any harder. So let's go. If this is the midpoint, that means that these two are equal to each other. So 14x plus 25 equals 73 minus 2x. I already told you I prefer my variables on the left, so I'm going to move this 2x. So this is 16x plus 25 equals 73. So now I'm going to move the 25. And let's see what that is. So we have 16 is left here, and then we have 73 minus 25, that would be 8, 48. And then we divide. X is equal to 3. I'm going to put x equals to 3. We're not done because we are left with substitution. we have to substitute into 1, then double it for our answer. So let's pick that one, 14x. So we have 14x plus 25. We're going to substitute the value of x, which is 3, plus 25. And then we have 3 times 14. And we get 42 plus 25. That would be 67, if I'm correct. 7, 6. So from here to here, it's 67, which means that 67 times 2 will give us around 134. So FH equals 134. Please ask me questions during class, especially on the homework. Maybe not the actual homework problems, maybe on problems related to that are on the homework paper. Alright.